Warm greetings from entire family of Pokhara Research Center and the entire family of American Embassy. Hello, all the dear PPSV fellows. Manuel Micaller is over here. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a distinct pleasure and honor for me to introduce the Deputy Chief of Mission, Manuel Micaller, over here. Mr. Micaller is a career member of the US Foreign Service, rank of Minister, Counselor. He assumed duty as the Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Embassy, Kathmandu, Nepal, in August 2019. So thank you for sharing your valuable time with us despite your busy schedule. And dear PPSV fellow present over here, all the executive team of Pokhara Research Center, Executive Director Susan Regmi, Dr. Durva Sasar, Culture Affairs Specialist, Carl Rogers, Culture Affairs Officer, US Embassy. And yes, everyone connecting from all around the country on the Zoom. My warmest welcome to you all. We all know that we're living at a decisive and difficult time in history. A small virus has locked many of us into quarantine and also forced the session to go online. Over 1 million people have perished in a year of COVID-19 virus, and multi-millions have contracted the disease. World military powerful countries from the southern to the northern hemisphere have been forced to their knees. They have come to an important realization that they may protect themselves from so-called visible adversaries, but they cannot protect themselves from an invisible, teeny, fluid common enemy that defies all the borders. Pandemic is one of many existential challenges we are facing these days. The most common, which is not an immediate threat, but which actually is climate change. By the time maybe I will marry, the Himalayas will have lost most of the snow. By the time of at the age of 40, with a pre-assume of 2 kids, I may have to displace myself internally as a recipient of natural disaster, like many in the region. The brunt of climate change induced disasters such as glacial outbursts, floods, landslide, seasonal storm, and fire will be more common in the country. Adding to the list, another existential threat is purely man-made than the climate change is, I believe, nationalism. The nationalistic temperature in the South Asia region has been increasing. Well, while talking a lot about the challenges, there are various good things as well that I must talk over here is, even though COVID-19 is the deadliest pandemic we have seen in a century, it is also worth noting that science stood it to steepest challenge and deliver us with a life-saving vaccine within a year. Years of activism and mobilization have brought climate change to the force of public discussion that today influence governance and politics of many countries. A new generation of youth everywhere. A new generation of youth everywhere is saying no to toxic nationalism. Every youth all across the world are more interested than ever to open up, to know each other and grow together. We need to do more to step up our action here in Nepal and elsewhere in the world to combat these momentum challenges. And in today's session, we are really excited. In today's session, we'll be talking about US unmeasurable many roles in the South Asia. And throughout the conversation, we'll also be talking about pandemic that, after all, we can't miss out the elephant in the room, and similar challenges, issues in the health and outside the health sector. We will touch upon the issue of political instability in the country, initial burnout and by the parliament dissolution, but now resolved by the court. We'll also address all the questions that our participants are really, really excited and have saved to ask to you, sir, today. So please stay tuned and thank you for your patience. I would like to request our guest speaker to share his words. Deputy Chief of Mission, Manuel Micaller. Sir, the floor is over to you. Thank you for your valuable presence.
Thank you, Prakriti. Can you all hear me? Good, good. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, I'm really glad to be with you today. I've got a great job here in Nepal. And one of the best aspects of my position has been the opportunity to engage with the youth of Nepal, particularly its future leaders. So first, let me congratulate you on being selected to be part of Camp 2 of the Pre-Professional Parliamentary Support Program. I really admire your passion, your expertise, and particularly your desire to support your local elected political leadership. Make no mistake, taking part in local politics is no easy task. It requires prioritizing the challenges facing your province, gathering factual information to present to Parliament so they can make informed decisions on your behalf. And it takes self-confidence and persuasion skills. I know that you are all up to this task, and I am particularly proud you are bringing the voice of youth into the governing process. You are the products of your communities, so you should have a say. You know your communities, so you are best equipped to help think through solutions to make your communities better. Plus, your leadership and participation in this fellowship with the Gandaki Provincial Parliament sets a strong example for youth leaders across the country. You and your peers are inspiring other youth to take part and to take action. Especially because the majority of Nepal's population is under the age of 35, youth participation in public policy making is essential. It's not optional. It gives voice to all of the people. And again, I thank you for committing to this kind of public service. I would like to take a moment before we turn to questions to talk to you about some of the challenges facing the world and how the United States is leading the way in partnering with countries like Nepal. So as you know, Joseph R. Biden was sworn in as President of the United States on January 20th. President Biden has an ambitious agenda needed to meet the complex web of issues facing the United States and the globe today. From combating and preventing pandemics like COVID-19, to strengthening democracies around the world, to addressing climate change, there is no question that the world is facing unprecedented challenges. But we feel confident that we can face them together. So let me address just a few of these priorities right at the top. First, the Biden administration has committed to strengthening our humanitarian response to COVID-19. We will work with the international community to support humanitarian relief and resilience efforts aimed at mitigating the impacts of COVID-19. In fact, we have rejoined important multilateral organizations that are combining forces to help combat this disease. And while COVID does not discriminate, it has hit some places harder than others. We recognize this, and the United States aims to tailor our support to build capacity in the communities most vulnerable to the harms of this virus. In Nepal specifically, the United States Agency for International Development has responded quickly and decisively on behalf of the American people to respond to the government of Nepal's call for assistance. Our COVID-19 health support programs have already reached more than 55% of the population. That's more than 1 in 2 Nepalis who have benefited directly from our assistance. We have directed over 28 million right here in Nepal in order to address both the health and secondary effects resulting from this crisis. When the pandemic was at its peak, USAID also delivered 100 life-saving ventilators to Nepal. I'm very proud of their efforts. They have literally saved lives here. But it's not just USAID. It is a whole of government approach on the part of the US government. The Department of Defense, through our Office of Defense Cooperation, has also provided resources and equipment throughout the country in our shared goal to beat the virus. But COVID is only one of many challenges we face. Democracies around the world are under great strain, perhaps more than ever. In order to support fellow democracies around the world, the Biden administration will be hosting a summit next year. We will bring together government and non-government actors to strengthen democratic institutions. At this meeting, we aim to honestly confront the forces that threaten democratic institutions: corruption, authoritarianism, misinformation, and a disregard for human rights among them. In Nepal, the US Embassy supports democratic programming. Today is one example, but among other examples, during the US presidential election, we hosted many virtual programs that enriched Nepali voters' understanding of their rights and their responsibilities in a democracy. At the local level, USAID helps communities to participate in development decision-making and to foster linkages between citizens and their local government bodies. At the national level, USAID supports government and political systems such as the Election Commission, the Constituent Assembly, and political parties, all because we know that democratic, inclusive, and effective governments are more stable, more inclusive, and better actors on the world's stages. And the last issue I want to highlight is one very much close to home for us here, and that's climate change, which is perhaps the defining issue of our time. From shifting weather patterns to rising sea levels, the impacts of climate change are global in scope and unprecedented in scale. Without decisive action of our leaders and ourselves, adapting to our future will be more difficult and costly. When Joe Biden became president of the United States immediately rejoined the Paris Agreement. He also has found innovative ways to make sure that the US government is taking an all of government approach again, and not just supplying lip service to this problem. The Biden administration also intends to make significant investments in climate action, both domestically and internationally. We will make good on our climate finance pledge, drive towards net zero emissions no later than 2050, and champion the best practices and policies for climate resilience and adaptation. We know Nepal has been a leader in the fight against climate change, and we look forward to partnering with the government and people of Nepal to address this existential challenge. Now, you may have noticed one unifying theme of America's response on these global issues, and that's multilateralism. We recognize that no one nation can tackle the challenges of the globe alone. We are a leader, but we firmly recognize the need to partner, to work together to solve these pressing matters, which is where you come in. As emerging policymakers, you all will need to internalize these issues and find local solutions to address them. You are in the unique position to inform and influence policymakers. You can encourage concrete steps to address these problems. Now, when Ambassador Berry last spoke with you, he shared the words of American President Theodore Roosevelt, quote, "Do what you can with what you have, where you are," unquote. And I want to remind you of that challenge. I know you want to see your province and your country rise to its great potential. Continue to think innovatively and to devise ways you can do your part. I have confidence that you and the rest of Nepal's youth will achieve great things for all of your communities. And with that, I just want to thank you again for the gracious invitation to join you this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to your questions and our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your a lot of insights and amazing notes. Yeah, having said that, we are on the periphery around asking you so many questions related to the challenges you have rightly mentioned. And as the Biden's administration is more focused on humanitarian work and developing international developments and other several organizations, being specific, what role can US and Nepal play individually and together in strengthening the international cooperation and preserving our multilateral institutions? Over to you, sir.
So again, I think we lead by our example. The Biden administration has attempted to do this with immediate actions since taking office. They have been off to an incredibly quick start. He has used all of the tools of government, from submitting targeted legislation to the Congress through executive actions on immigration, on climate change, rejoining the Paris Agreement, as I mentioned earlier. So that's an example of leading by example. Nepal has done much the same in many areas on peacekeeping, on democracy, and on climate change. So we are very much looking forward to the next iteration of the Sagamartha Sambad dialogue. We encourage Nepal to continue to play its rightful leadership role on these issues by speaking out, by reaching out to the United States, its fellow neighbors, and its partners.
Thank you, sir. So I have already got a few pre-questions from our participants, and I didn't want to consume a lot of time. So having said that, I'd like to give floor to one of our participants who is here, Ms. Susmita Chetri. You have the floor.
Good afternoon and namaste. I have 3 questions for you, sir. And my first question is, what does USA expect from Nepal, or what is the United States national interest in Nepal? And my second question is, what were some challenges that you face as the DCM to Nepal, and how did you overcome them? And my third question is, what are your greatest achievements as the US DCM to Nepal? Thank you.
Thank you very much for those great questions. I'll take them each in turn. So first of all, we view Nepal and the Nepali people as longstanding friends and partners of the United States. Our interests are aligned in many areas. So I start with our shared goal of Nepal being a sovereign, democratic, independent and strong state that can provide for its people and maintain its sovereignty. That's our starting point, and to maintain its example as a democracy. And our over 70 plus years of assistance and engagement through USAID and through other US government entities has been directed towards those goals. How we can partner together is again by leading by example and having these frank, open, transparent discussions among friends. Your second question was related to the challenges of being a diplomat here in Nepal specifically, and what have been my greatest achievements or achievement. I've been here for now over a year and a half. Transitions are very difficult for diplomats because we move around a lot. So the main challenge is to quickly get up to speed on the issues, political, economic, human rights, to understand the culture, the history of the new environment that we are operating under, so that we could be as effective as possible in, number one, representing the United States and the American people to the people of Nepal, and working with the government, again, on our shared values and our shared goals. I think the greatest success that I have had has been a direct result of the warmth and hospitality I have received from the Nepali people. I have been able to get up to speed very, very quickly on the issues and have benefited from my exposure to your incredible history and culture because of the welcome that I have received here. Even in this virtual world, that process has not ended. So thank you again for those questions.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. And we can see a lot of hearts were popping up while you're expressing your emotions, how you're attached with Nepal and being a life of diplomat. So coming on the same look, we also have a similar kind of question from one of our participants, Ms. Swikriti Katwal. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good
My question for you is, having had been a foreign service officer and diplomat for over 25 years, how is the life of a diplomat different from any other government employee? And as a diplomat yourself, what sort of academic and diplomatic qualifications do you suggest a student of international relations and diplomacy should have? And my last question is there any place for personal animosity or political division in the foreign policy execution and implementation by a diplomat?
Okay, great questions. So first of all, the life and career of a diplomat is a wonderful, rich, rewarding life. And I would encourage all of you who might have an interest in foreign policy and international affairs to consider this as a career, because I think there is no greater honor than serving and representing your country overseas. So please do look into that opportunity. In terms of preparing for such a career, there are multiple paths and multiple academic backgrounds. We have very diverse diplomats in our diplomatic corps. I have a more traditional background in that I did study international relations and economics, but we have former journalists, former lawyers, former military, Peace Corps, the list goes on and on. So there is not one set path to success. I think what we look for are well-rounded, open-minded people with good judgment. And I will start there. Regardless of the educational path that you have taken, it is very important to be well-read, well-informed, and open to new ideas and different views. I'm trying to recall, your follow-up question was related to specific challenges the diplomats face?
I ask about, is there any place for personal animosity and political division in the foreign policy execution by a diplomat?
Okay, so all of us are individuals with our individual views, including political views and backgrounds. In our official roles, however, our role is to represent the government and the people of the United States. So on policy, we do have direction that starts with the president and his national security strategy and his foreign policy. Within our internal operations, there is absolutely room for dissent. To convey disagreements with policy, or even short of disagreements, to convey our views and recommendations. But our system is that once the policy decision is made by our elected officials, we move forward on that basis. No one voted for me, okay? So I need to carry out the will of our elected officials, whether I agree with them or not. Now, in extreme cases, and this does happen on occasion, if the policy disagreements are so strong and an individual, a diplomat, has moral or ethical objections, the option is resignation, to leave government service with that as the basis, that they could not in rightful good conscience carry out the orders that they were given. This happened most notably in the United States Diplomatic Corps during the Vietnam War, which led to all kinds of reforms in our institution to allow additional channels to convey dissenting views. And your third question, please remind me.
I think you answered all my questions.
Oh.
Yeah, you answer all the questions. I'm also going through the questions. It's about what you suggest to the student who want to go to the IR and political divisions. Yeah, you address all the answers, I guess. So rightly quoted, and I want to borrow a line from you, that there is not a set path to be successful, to succeed. So yeah, I think, yeah, I can see a lot of hearts on the screen. Oh my God. Uh, so I want to address on a question on slightly another loop is, we're talking about the policy discourse and all. So we are well aware that Nepal has faced the constant political instability. The recent parliamentary dissolution and now reassemble frames this statement. It's obviously easy to be hopeless in such a situation. And over the year, you can see that with the outflow of youth and adults abroad for jobs and education, what messages do you have for leaders and a youth in Nepal, like the fellow in PPSP to be specific? And how do you think the country can attract more and more foreign investment? And also, how can the US mission in Nepal help in all these regards? Thank you, sir.
Yes. So to start with the question of political instability and democracy, we have a saying that we recognize that democracy is an imperfect system, but it remains the best system we have. So I would encourage everyone to keep the faith in this imperfect system. The other historical precedent we have from the American system is the goal of democracy was never efficiency. You know, it was to make sure that the views and the will of the people were represented. And if you go back to the founders of the country, they actually made a mistake in that they erred heavily on the side of inefficiency to protect the rights of the people. So before we had the US Constitution, we had the Articles of Confederation, which set up a very weak and ineffective government, and we had to regroup and readdress that. In terms of the situation here, we continue to look to Nepal, to its leaders, to its citizens, to respect the rule of law, to engage in political discourse and debate. Disagreements are a part of democracy, but we encourage those disagreements and debates to be carried out peacefully and with respect to rule of law. But in terms of foreign direct investment, this is a difficult one because Nepal has some natural challenges. I think one of your great natural resources, your natural assets here, it's the beauty of this country, your natural resources. But on the flip side, this is a landlocked country, distant from key markets in a tough neighborhood. You are also a small market. So what we also often remind our partners in the government, in the business sector, is in the global economy, we are all competing for trade, for investment, for dollars and jobs. So we need to encourage the government to look smartly at legislation, recognizing that businesses and investors vote with their feet. They are in most cases, at least in the United States context, investors have to respond to shareholders and boards. And if the choice is between a larger market with more transparent legislation and a better business climate versus a smaller market with potentially some questionable legislation or lack of transparency or corruption, businesses will go elsewhere. There is a misperception that I often have encountered in previous postings around the world that the private sector responds to the US government. You work for the US Embassy, tell General Electric to invest here. The global economy doesn't work that way. So we will continue to do our part to assist with structural reforms through USAID, but this partnership needs both sides to recognize those realities.
So we're hopeful that with the care and a lot of support we're getting from US Embassy, we'll be getting a stable government on this global economy world. We are hopeful. So having said that, you have also rightly mentioned about the climate change, one of the major issues. So I'd like to give a floor to one of the participants who wants to ask the question in that regard. Yeah, Ms. Smriti Baral, you have the floor.
Thank you. Greetings, sir. So recently, our President Biden appointed the former Secretary of State, John Kerry, as a special presidential envoy for climate, and Biden administration has made fighting climate change is a top priority agenda, and also the US joined Paris Climate Agreement. In recent times, Nepal is also facing a lot of climate change, and how can the US government support Nepal in this matter? Thank you.
So I think the appointment of former Secretary Kerry, one of our senior most and most seasoned diplomats and political figures, was also a very concrete sign of the seriousness and the prioritization that President Biden puts on this issue. John Kerry's office is in the State Department, the agency he formerly led, but he reports directly to the president. He is the president's special envoy. And again, part of the approach is for the United States not to lead alone, but to work through multilateral institutions and with key partners. So stand by. The administration is brand new. Its policy direction and specifics continue to evolve. But from the US Embassy side, as we feed into these policy deliberations in Washington, we are advocating for a role for Nepal based on the unique risks that you do face from climate change, on glacial melt, on pollution, on carbon emissions here, and the leadership role that Nepal has played in the past and that it can continue to play in partnership with the United States. So I think that's my first request of the government and the people of Nepal, is that we continue these discussions at our level so that we can continue to feed into our elected officials our recommendations and our ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Smriti, for such a wonderful question, and thank you, sir. Yeah, I also have a lot of list of questions from our participants. Without taking a longer delay, I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Aarti Baral. You have the floor.
Namaste. Am I audible? Okay, namaste. And my question is, because of the COVID-19, like every other sector, the education sector is severely affected all over the world. Many schools are closed to date. Many students have lost their academic year, and there have been huge dropout rates. In such a scenario, what can country like Nepal and other countries in the world do to boost up the students psychologically? What roles should the government play to bear the loss that all the students had to bear, be it because of the lack of farsightedness of the government or the lack of strategic plans to uplift the education sector? The economy can be uplifted, tourism sector can be recovered, but how will the students recover from the fact that they lost the whole academic year? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that very important question. You know, in my earlier remarks, I commented on USAID's efforts to address not only the health effects, but the secondary effects of COVID-19 on the economy, on mental health issues around the world, in the United States, in other countries. We have seen, as a result of COVID-19, increases in suicide rates, increases in domestic violence, and the situation of our children is a real tragedy, because this is not a healthy environment for learning or for their well-being or their development as children. We are struggling with this issue in the United States as well. And the metric we are trying to use is, we would very much like children to return to in-person classes. but only when it is safe to do so. So the appeal that we make in the United States, and that I think we should echo here, is the sooner we beat this virus, the sooner we can go back to our lives, our work, our places of employment, our social gatherings that are so critical for our own well-being, and get our children back to school. What we're appealing to on the part of American citizens and our friends and partners around the world is, number one, a sense of community, a sense of patriotism to our own countries, and a sense of responsibility as global citizens. So all of us, starting with ourselves, need to take a step back and recognize that our personal behavior has ramifications. So it is a plea, an appeal for all of us to be responsible, to wear a mask, to limit outside engagements where possible, so that we can get control over this virus. You've heard the term bending the curve. We all have a role to play in this. And I think that's the first step that we can do as citizens. In terms of government response, there is absolutely a role for government. So on the United States side, in our assistance, we have shifted resources and found additional resources to assist Nepal and our other partners. Longer term, one of the immediate challenges we faced and we saw worldwide with virtual or online learning was the digital divide. Not every student in every city or village or town had the resources or the ability to do this. So I think that's something that we quickly need to address long term. School size, school access. This is another area where USAID has assisted, particularly following the earthquake, in increasing classroom capacity. That's another area that we need to look in for once we get back to in-person education and teaching.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Arati, for your question. And I also have another question from the participant. For opportunity seeker her dental surgery, and she's asking me to ask the question on her behalf. So it's a question from Miss Bhavana Vandari. So I'm going to quote her question. The USA is known for its role in protecting and promoting human rights throughout the world. Human rights, especially the rights of women and girls, have become one of the urgent issues to be by the Nepalese government and the US to address the matter together. Over to you.
Okay, so there are two things that I'd want to emphasize. Number one is the renewed focus that the Biden administration has put on these very issues, particularly women's empowerment and health. When the Biden administration came in, he leaned heavily on executive orders. You have a different term for it here in Nepal, but it is executive action out of the office of the president that does not require action by the US Congress, so no legislative need. The four main areas he looked at were, again, a return to multilateralism, climate change action, women's empowerment and health, and advancing LGBTIQ plus rights around the world. So that is in terms of renewed focus and prioritization. But I would also like to offer the flip side of the coin. The other perspective here is American foreign policy and engagement has been defined by consistency and continuity across administrations on these issues. Human rights has always been a priority and importance to us. What the Biden administration is doing is just elevating that a little further from already what was a consistently high level. What we can do in partnership is the answer. How we could work collaboratively to lead by example and have these open and frank discussions. We have a lot in common in terms of our shared values. We have successes that we can point to jointly and individually, and where we disagree or where we have disagreements, we can have that open conversation among friends.
Thank you, sir. I have a lot of questions from participants, but I'm at the same time skeptical about the time. I hope you give us slightly more time to address all the questions from the participants, at least a few questions from the participants. I'd like to give floor to Ms. Vidya Devi Sudedi for the question. Hello.
Hello, Dee. Am I audible? I'm really sorry. I'm having unstable connection.
You are audible. I can hear you.
Namaste, sir, and a very warm good afternoon. My question is, Nepal and US has shared more than 70 years periods. There have been suspicions, misinformation, and various assumptions regarding the projects launched by US, be it and has it affected the Nepal-US relation in any way? Over to you, sir.
Great, thank you for that question. So I'd like to return to 2 points that I raised in my earlier remarks. That number one, in democracy, disagreement and debate is normal. It's acceptable, and disagreements among friends is also normal. And we can have those conversations, but what we hope for, what we seek is that those disagreements and those debates and discussions are based on facts and based on correct information. Misinformation and disinformation is a phenomenon that the United States is struggling with at home and around the world. And we know that all of our friends and partners are dealing with similar challenges. So I think the first thing that we need to do is double down on building up the capacity and the professionalism of our journalists, both day-to-day journalists and informal journalists, social media influencers and bloggers. That they learn the techniques and skills, number one, to report accurately and factually, and number two, to be able to discern disinformation and distinguish facts from opinion, for example. I think the disinformation surrounding United States objectives and policies and specific programs here has been disappointing for us. Because the recent disinformation flies directly in the face of our 70-plus year track record that is available, that is open and transparent for anyone to scrutinize. What have we done here? We have never asked the Nepali people or government to join a military alliance. We have never asked Nepal to choose among its neighbors. In fact, we have always encouraged Nepal to have positive, productive relationships with all of its neighbors and all of its partners, with only one key requirement, that your neighbors respect your sovereignty as we do. The 70-plus year track record of assistance from development to economics, to political assistance, to military and security assistance is based on what I talked about earlier. It is a belief that a strong, sovereign, prosperous Nepal is in the national security and foreign policy interests of the United States. When Nepal is strong, prosperous, sovereign, and democratic, that's a good thing for the United States, for all of South Asia, and for the world. That's the starting point that we come from. So I encourage you to look skeptically at some of the information and conspiracy theories that are out there. I know you didn't mention this specifically, but the Millennium Challenge account, the Millennium Challenge Compact is what is frequently targeted, we believe, for the wrong reasons. The history of that, in short, was this was a program requested by successive governments of Nepal, democratically elected governments. The specific parameters of this project were shaped by Nepali elected officials and technical experts. It is Nepal's choice to move forward with this compact. We strongly encourage them to do so because we believe it is in their self-interest to do so. Let me stop there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vidya. So, my clock is showing the time is off, but I have just at least 2 more questions from the participants. So would you please allow me to give them the floor? And I want to ask for a few more minutes from you. Agree? Okay. I guess that's yes from your side, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So I would like to ask Ms. Minnie Kushum to ask the question to the sir. Minnie, you have the floor.
So, namaste, sir. I would like to know your views regarding the recent military coup and its ouster in Myanmar. What major steps do the citizens take in such situation? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. We are following, the United States government is following the situation very closely and with great concern. The United States, first of all, stands in solidarity with the people of Burma, who came out across the country with courage and determination to reject a military coup. What they are calling for is a return to democratic governance, peace, and rule of law. So from the United States perspective, let there be no doubt, we condemn the security forces' brutal attacks on unarmed protesters, which we know has resulted in, to date, at least 4 deaths and injuries to over 40 individuals. Again, peaceful protesters. We also condemn the ongoing arrests and detentions of hundreds of elected political officials, human rights defenders, and again, peaceful protesters. So the United States is following the situation with great concern. We have communicated these views to the parties on the ground in Burma, and we have already imposed some sanctions and called on the military and police to again cease all attacks on peaceful protesters and to immediately release all of those who have been unjustly detained. We will continue to work with our friends and partners. Again, in the spirit of multilateralism, the United States will lead on this issue, but in partnership with our friends and the international community. We will look at accountability for the coup leaders and those responsible for violence. So it is an evolving situation that we are monitoring and addressing closely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Minnie Kusum. So one last question from participants. Ms. Deepa Adhikari, you have the floor.
Am I audible? Hello and namaste, sir. Would you please explain President Biden immigration policy? Has the Biden administration rescinded Muslim ban as a promise during the election campaigns? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. In fact, one of President Biden's first acts as president, this was on January 20th, was to revoke the executive order 13780 from his predecessor that restricted immigration to the United States and visas from certain countries. This was commonly referred to as the Muslim ban. So Joe Biden did in fact rescind that executive order on his first day in office. In addition, he is moving forward with further reforms to our immigration policy and our immigration system. He has already sent legislation to the US Congress to modernize our immigration system with a priority, a focus on keeping families united, keeping families together, addressing economic concerns, and responsibly managing our border in a way that the United States will remain a refuge for those fleeing persecution around the world. So the starting point for the Biden administration's approach is a belief that immigrants have helped strengthen America's families, communities, businesses, and workforce. And it has, immigrants have infused the United States with our entrepreneurial spirit, creativity, energy, and ingenuity. So that's the starting point. And again, stay tuned because the administration is just getting started, and you will see more policy initiatives and legislation rolling out in that direction.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Deepa. There were a lot of questions that I am receiving from the participants, and if I'm going to address, it will take more hours and hours, and I'm hopeful that we will get opportunity to address all those questions once again in someday in future. Having said that, sir, do you have any closing remarks, closing points to all the participants over here you'd like to address them?
Certainly. First of all, thank you again for the kind invitation. I enjoyed our discussion. I love taking the tough questions, the good questions, and look forward to an opportunity to do so again in the future. Please continue to do what you are doing, leading by example, leading in your communities. You are the future of this country, not the current political leaders on either side. So the future of this country is in your hands. And that's what gives me hope and a sense of optimism, even on tough days, is the opportunities that I have had to interact with young emerging leaders like yourselves. So again, thank you very much. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. You are boosting us our extra confidence. So I'd like to request the Executive Director of Pokhara Research Center to have remarks. Mr. Rengmi.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Deputy Chief of Mission, Manuel P. Micaller, for your wonderful presence and interaction with PPSP participants in your busy schedule. It has been a long journey with so many hurdles. The COVID-19 pandemic has definitely hit everyone hard, and we were any exceptions. The PPSP camp has already brought its impact to our participants, as many of the participants have rightly shared their experiences about need of reading the Constitution of Nepal, which was one of the assignment of virtual camp 2. I'd like to take this opportunity to us to execute this program. And this would not have been possible without constant support of our respected Durba sir, who has spent countless hours supporting us in any matter or issues or any difficulties. Thank you to Carl Rogers, Cultural Affairs Officer, who constantly support and motivate us as well as our PPSP participants to explore their best from the time of incubation of this idea of PPSP fellowship, which is in the process of materializing. Me and my team of Pokhara Research Center will leave no stone unturned to fulfill our responsibilities. Thank you for your valuable time and insightful discussion on confronting the challenges of today's world. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, sir. Thank you, Manuel, because for your valuable presence. It was our immense pleasure to hug you and to listen to you throughout. And I could really see, oh my God, the time flies so fast just hearing you. And thank you very much, dear participants, Durba sir, Carl sir, for your continuous guidance, and we are hopeful that this family will be the light to weep out all the darkness we're seeing, not just in Nepal, but the entire world. Thank you, Pokhara Research Center and US Embassy Nepal for giving me the opportunity to be the moderator of this session. Thank you very much.